Today's video, I want to do a national rent review. What's the latest? What's the greatest? Let's get into it. Rents have opened 2022 in much the same way it spent 2021, setting all-time highs. The median one-bedroom rent national index rose 1,374, or roughly 0.000112 this month, which is 12% higher year over year. The median two-bedroom rose to 1,698. That's 14.1% year over year growth, ladies and gentlemen. So let's delve into some highlights before we get into the nuggets. Number one, could Boston's median one-bedroom rent pass San Francisco? Everyone wants to know. After both cities saw prices go into free fall in 2020, Boston's rental rebound in 2021 and San Francisco's ongoing stagnation have the bean town close to passing San Francisco to become the second most expensive city in the country. So while rent growth, showed signs of slowing down at the end of what was a absolutely torrid 2021, January's data shows rent hitting yet another all-time high, with median one-bedroom rent up 12% year over year nationally. The median two-bedroom rent is up 14.1% year over year. So keep that in mind nationally. Number three, when we talk about major metropolitan areas, specifically in Texas, have been those that have experienced the most rent growth since the pandemic began. This madness began in March 2020. But Austin, Texas, through the roof. But if you look at other areas like Houston and some of the surrounding cities, have seen relatively modest rent growth. So in January, the median asking rent for a one-bedroom apartment increased by 10% or more in 56 of the 100 largest cities in the U.S. compared to a year earlier. So in 34 of the 100 largest cities, one-bedroom rents spiked by 15% or more. In 20 of these cities, rent spiked by 20% or more, and in 11 of them, rent spiked by a whopping 25% or more. So many of the cities with the largest year-over-year rent spikes are medium-sized cities with more modest incomes. So look at this graph of Fresno, California. I almost lived there. I went there for a week. That would have been very interesting. So Fresno coming at the top with a median asking rent for one-bedroom apartments in January skyrocketed by 28% in 12 months and by a whopping 41% in 2 years. So it went from $1,000 in January to 2020 to $1,410 in January 2022. That's according to the Zuper National Rent Report and some other apartment list data that I pull, and 3 other reports and some internal data. I also use the MLS. So rent increases like that are insane. So if you got rentals in Fresno, you're looking pretty good. So asking rents are advertised rents for apartments listed at various rental listing services. Like I said, including the multiple listing service MLS. They show the current pricing of the market, kind of like a price tag. They don't include rents that tenants have been paying for months or years. Some of the data is limited to apartments in the multifamily sector buildings and do not include single-family houses for rent. So when we talk about medium means that half of the apartments are listed at higher rents and half are listed at lower rents, roughly. So take a look at these, 34 cities of the largest 100 cities where the median asking rent for a one-bedroom apartment spiked by 15% to 28% year over year. So these can be huge, but there's two sides of this. You got the rents going up for the tenants. Landlord costs are going up, but both sides are experiencing inflation. Landlords have mortgages, they have taxes, they got maintenance expenses. So it can be struggling for, let's say, the tenants. If you're your pay only goes up 8% and your rent goes up 19%. You know, these landlords, it's kind of both sides. You got to look at both sides. There's hardships on both sides, and in some cities, people have been living rent free for 2 years. So the highest rent areas, number one, so you got Fresno, California, Scottsdale, Arizona, Orlando, Knoxville, Tennessee, Boston, Massachusetts, Glendale, Arizona, and coming in at number 7, Tampa, Florida. Tampa, Florida. So Fresno coming in at number 1. So rents didn't spike in all cities. As I talked about earlier, San Francisco currently holds that title after falling behind New York in the summer of 2021. But San Francisco's stagnant rent growth coupled with Boston's dramatic rebound has the latter within striking distance of the former. So in January, Boston's median one-bedroom rent rose to $27.20, setting a new all-time high. San Francisco's median one-bedroom rent is $28.50, putting Boston just $130 behind. So it's incredible what's going on in Boston. So look at this chart in San Francisco. Take a look. If you're visual, you got a chart there to take a look at. In San Francisco, the median asking rent rose 6% year over year in January to $28.50, but has been relatively stable for the past 8 months and is still down by 23% from the peak in June 2019. We all remember that. The peak in 2019 was a whopping $37.20. That's totally insane. It was locally, the locals called it the housing crisis because middle-class San Franciscoans couldn't afford rent a one-bedroom apartment. You know, you had people, nurses, sleeping in their cars in the hospital lots and get off their shift and go take a shower in the hospital. A lot of that was going on. I think some of that has been curtailed. So they got some much-needed relief. Leaves renters a little more with some cash to spend on other things. So San Francisco, man, I tell you, I've been going on and off there for years. I never invested there, and not right now, that's for sure. So the 8 cities where one-bedroom rents fell, coming in at number 1, Newark, New Jersey, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 3, Richmond, Virginia, Minneapolis, St. Louis, Kansas City, Cincy, Ohio, and New Orleans. So in Newark, rents plunged by 25% year over year, but just back to normal from the ridiculous peak a year ago when landlords got a little stupid with the notion that Manhattanites who could work from home, that good old remote work, would flee Newark, and so they could jack up their rents and asking prices to police those Manhattanites and get them to come to Newark. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? It didn't work. And now rents are back where they were in 2019. So if you look at only 8 cities of the 100 largest cities where rents fell, including this special case of Newark. So take a look at this chart if you're visual. So the largest 100 rental markets, this is interesting. So look at the top 7 here. So we got New York, not surprising, San Francisco, Boston, San Jose, Miami, Washington, D.C., make it 6. I don't want to bore you, and Los Angeles, California. So those are your top markets. And take a look at this chart, the billionaire class. You know, you see the difference there, and that really puts things into perspective. You know, this is the biggest, fastest wealth disparity ever, as the richest got far richer since Q1 2020, while nothing much has changed for the lower 50%, except that their expenses, such as rents, are now soaring. So never let a good crisis go to waste. I'm talking the multi, big boys in the billionaire class, even higher, have seen their net worth skyrocket. So kind of sum it up, but you know, over the course of 2021, rental patterns in you know, two sides diverged. Residents on the East Coast returned, you know, to the city after the vaccine rollout began, pushing you know, vacancy rates down and rent back up. In January's data, Boston's median one-bedroom rent, is up, as I said, 26.5% year over year relative to March 2020. Boston is currently up 8.8%, meaning it made up all the ground it lost, ladies and gentlemen, 2020. So, like I always said, I've always been optimistic about the city centers. They're not going to go away. And the West Coast also saw residents return to cities after the vaccine rollout, but not as rapidly as did on the East Coast. And of the major West Coast cities, the Bay Area has been considerably slower to rebound overall. And in January data, San Francisco rent is up just 6.3% year over year. Relative to March 2020, the city is currently still down by 18.6%, meaning it has yet to make up ground and lost in 2020. Might have something to do with the homeless problem there and all the crime in San Francisco. I had to go there on a quick turnaround, and I wanted to stay extra, and I left a day early. I was downtown. I made a mistake. It was crazy. It's out of control, and I'm not pointing my finger at San Francisco, but a lot of cities. But they're having some major problems, and I know what happened in Marin County and the sales out there for real estate. It's crazy, but the city's out of control. It needs to be fixed, and there's a lot of problems, and it's shameful what's going on in that city right now. It's a little dangerous, and I left early. I said, I'm out. See ya. So that's National Rent Review, just top line review. It's interesting, the migration patterns when you look at the West and East, and how are things panning out. A lot of people are saying the pandemic's over, and you just have to live with it. Maybe that's the right thought process right now. It's been going on long enough, and seems like we got a handle on it, know more about it, know the data, know the science. So we'll have to see how things pan out in 2022. Right now, inventory is down, and January, February are slow months in the housing market, so should be a crazy